Welcome to the Mission Driven Leader, presented by TaleoConnects.com, where we explore the new, unknown, and innovative themes for work and give people the ability to show up resilient every day. Here are your hosts, former Chief Knowledge Officer of NASA, Ed Hoffman, and partner and Vice President of Portfolio Management at Taleo, Laurel Sim.
Yeah, we're starting off our afternoon here with our session. I want to make sure I get the name right here. The Mission Driven Leader. And it is being presented by Dr. Ed Hoffman, who we saw earlier, and Laurel Sim. So I'll give a little bit of an introduction for Laurel, because we all at this point know Ed. Laurel is a partner and vice president of portfolio management at Taleo. She has more than 20 years of experience as an award-winning program manager and senior project exec. Her expertise and passion for quality has become a pillar of Taleo's identity, and she's a big driver behind how they engage with both clients and consultants. So just before we get started here, I do want to mention one thing. This presentation is actually also a podcast recording. So it's going to be very interactive. My understanding is that it's going to be structured kind of as a free-form conversation. So you'll all be encouraged to ask questions and comment. Please wait to get the microphone, otherwise they'll just be static on the podcast recording. So if you have something you'd like to contribute or a question you'd like to ask, put your hand way up high so we can see it. We've got a few runners around the room, and we will bring a mic to you. So with that, let me invite up Dr. Ed Hoffman and Laurel Sim.
Thank you. It really sucks that Ed has such a fancy title with doctor in front of it, and all I get is Laurel Sim, but it's fine. It's just fine. So we do have an active podcast, and this little guy, I'm going to slide over here a bit.
We're going to get closer.
Yeah, because otherwise I can't see all the cool people over here. So we do have a podcast. Our podcast has been running for 2.5 years. And
how many people have heard the podcast?
Yay, thank you.
There's 4 hands that went up.
Well, and I paid them to put their hands up, so it's fine. Okay. And how our podcast works, it was actually a question from the audience already, is how you get to be a guest on our podcast. And currently to date, we go throughout our community to find interesting people that we think can add some context or some opportunity for growth into our community. And so I bring on like movie producers,
cool people,
and TV broadcasters and sports Olympians. Yeah. And he brings on, like, I don't know, you built the spaceship and stuff.
Boring stuff. I'm more excited about the hockey announcers and the Olympians. And
then I'm really embarrassed and intimidated by the big brain people that show up all of the time. But I fake it to make it with Ed every time. So we do have some really cool NASA shirts. So we're looking for some cool questions to happen in order for you to get these, because they're prized possessions that we just bought yesterday. But before we get started, Ed needs to know that we were on a hiatus for 3 months with the podcast because of an accident.
So I thought it was something I said.
No. Well,
literally, you stopped talking to me for like 3 months.
Yeah. Well, that was also on purpose. And so what happened is I actually got a concussion. So I have to stand up for this part of the story. You're all really lucky. Concussions are my specialty. I'm very good at them. And this is about a generational thing, like really learning a lot about myself and my family. I got concussed by a meat slicer.
Oof.
Yeah. You mean none of you have? Okay. So it's an automatic meat slicer. My nephew is a butcher. He was touching all the buttons, couldn't get it started for me. And I said, well, don't worry about it. I'll just get the model number. I'll stand right here because this is a really good story, Ed. You haven't seen it yet.
Oh, all right.
Okay. And so the meat slicer sits about like this, and it's got this really fast tray that slides back really hard and then goes forward really hard to cut the meat.
Right.
Okay, you got this. All right. And
how many of you are familiar with meat slicers?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Way more than have watched our podcast. So that's
okay.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Right.
Okay. And so my nephew's pushing these buttons because he just got it and he didn't have a manual. It didn't come with a manual.
Okay.
He's pushing the buttons and I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. I'm just going to take a picture of the model number and then I'll look it up online for you. And he's listening, but not really listening. So I go down like this and I'm taking a picture and all of a sudden it comes on. And I'm hear this noise, and I'm like, holy tunk. And then I went down on the ground. And I would have gone down on the ground right now, but I'm wearing a dress.
Yeah, no.
And so, like, it was a bad bruising situation, a lot of trauma on the head. And he and I were in the other room. And 15 minutes later, and this is a true story because I don't know how to make this stuff up, my husband comes in with my other nephew because they got the text saying, we don't know how to start the meat slicer. We're in the other room tending to my very injured head. And, and my other nephew starts pushing the buttons and he couldn't quite remember. And my husband, Sasha, says, oh, don't worry about it. I'll get the model number. He got hit in the head, but because he's taller with a longer arm, he kind of got it and he was wearing a hat and he kind of was like, oh, and he tipped over. He's like, oh, well, that sort of sucks. As that's happening, we come in the room. We're like, no! And then I was happy for a minute because I thought he got hurt like
that's
me.
Nice.
Yeah,
nice.
Because that's a good marriage.
Yeah.
But then it didn't turn out that way. He wasn't really injured. But what I learned is both of our nephews had went online to YouTube to find the video to how to turn it on. But there wasn't one for this meat slicer. And us old school kids were like, don't worry, I'll get the model number. We'll look it up online through and get you the old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so for 3 months.
Obviously, lessons learned is not a part of your family.
Yeah. So this is a generational thing, okay? Yeah. So that's why we were off for 3 months.
All right. I thought the story was going to have something to do with you playing hockey, but
no. Which
would have been a much cooler kind of
and
story.
I probably would have had more concussions. So,
Right.
So how this works is it's a free-form conversation. You get to ask Ed any question you want, not too often. Well,
how many of you know Laurel?
Yeah.
How many of you have always wanted to put her on the spot by asking? Right. So that's how we encourage that.
Down. But we all know who's the guy here. So it is a complete free-for-all.
Okay.
Yeah, except for politics and religion. Because when we get into those things, bad things happen.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So opportunity, it's open-ended.
So you just put up your hand and ask the questions and just pause.
One of the things maybe while we wait, because usually there's a timidity in terms of the first starting mission. Why did we call it the mission-driven leader?
I don't actually know the answer.
So here's the background. So 2 years ago, I wrote a book called The Smart Mission. It was basically, so I like talking, as you've figured this out, hours and hours ago.
Yeah, by the way, you were a little tight on your presentation, just an observation.
Tight. So I don't like writing as much because it's solitary and all that kind of stuff, but I had an opportunity, MIT Press, to write. And I loved NASA. That's another thing that came to, and I thought this is a chance to just do a love letter to project people, the nature of the work, and all this kind of stuff. And as we kept working it, the book actually wrote itself fairly quickly. But I kept stressing out what we're going to call this thing because I didn't want it to be another, learning book or knowledge book or anything like that. And I had a brilliant editor, Emily Tabor, just a wonderful editor. She asked great questions. And she said, whenever you talk about mission, you get animated, you get excited. And I got excited. I said, yeah, Emily, NASA, it's about the mission. And really in terms of projects are about missions, military, pharma, whatever you're doing, that's the juice. But there are smart missions, and then there are the opposite of smart missions. We don't even like to talk about meat slicer missions. And so she said, that's it. She said, we call it the SMART mission. And so Laura, a couple of years back, or a few years back, said, would you like to do a podcast with me? And I said, yeah, I'd like to do anything with you. I mean, I don't have to think about it too hard. It's fun. I'll have a good time. I don't care if anybody's there or anything like that. And then he said, let's focus it around
Your
the
book.
mission.
Your book, yeah.
So that's the background.
And then we didn't focus around his book at all.
No, never. But I mean, to me, that's it. I mean, what makes, I think, projects sizzle and what makes the work we do, I think, really work is that we feel we're doing something that matters. You go to a pharmaceutical company, there are pictures of children and all these kind of, and you know what the message is, right? I think in terms of oil and gas, there are things that you're doing in terms of energy for organizations. So project people, I think, are geared towards improving society, and it's mission driven, and that is the most important thing. I've seen people hate each other, but when you talk about mission, they come together. I've seen teams of good people, an average level of capability, but they just integrate, they synergized. And I've seen brilliant teams that never had a sense of why they're together, and it goes in a different direction. So that's the notion of the mission driven. And we just kind of like this, just kind of talk about stuff. And we usually have a guest who focuses it.
That's super smart and then makes...
Or not, just normal good
those
people.
Are my guests. But.
So what questions, you have any questions? Or, all righty, we got the president
Thank you. Hello. I've always been curious why it was mission-driven leadership, and like where you think the parallels or differences are between project managers and leaders. Are they the same? Are they different? What are the character traits? This might be opening Pandora's box.
So I'll start because I have a strong feeling about that.
And it's your book.
Well, but it's in general, really back. When NASA told me, so the background story, it's kind of a funny story. I get a call one day, I was a few years into my work at NASA, and my background was leadership competencies, working with teams and change management. So I was a behavioral guy. The groups that I loved working with were project teams because I thought literally they were insane. NASA projects are insane. They don't take, they would be yelling, but they had a sense of where they were going. The institutional teams that I worked with, they were nice, they were pleasant, but I'd be working the same issues every 6. So I had this sense of the importance of project. Because of the background, I was one of the only people doing at the time what I was doing. And so I get a call from one of the leaders in Washington headquarters, a guy named Dave Hornestay, wonderful person. And he says, Ed, we would like you to apply. And I thought he was going to say to create a leadership academy, which was my background. So I'm getting all excited. He said, we would like you to establish a project management academy. And I was in my 20s, so you say, and you can probably tell, I grew up in Brooklyn, so you say things that come out. What I came out is that you people in Washington are as stupid as everyone in the field says you are. Total silence on the other end. And I said, Dave, you know my background is psychology. I know nothing about project management. I know less about engineering. Why would you want to get an expert in project management? And kind of ended that. Thank the Lord, he called me the next day. Funny. He said, please don't hang up on me. But we've talked it over. We really think that you would give us the best chance to create a learning environment. NASA is very decentralized. So it is not hierarchical. If you get a direction from the top, people will pay attention or not. The power is at the project level. That's where the expertise is. And what they said is if we appoint somebody who's got deep expertise in project management, aerospace engineering, they're going to have strong views on it. They're going to try to take it in that direction. And the field centers across NASA will kill that person. It will never take off. But you're going to have to learn with the project community. They're going to have to learn from you in terms of learning. And that's why we feel. It was a brilliant answer. And I profusely apologized for the approach. And I said yes with great trepidation. And as we were doing this, the question is, what do we call this? Initially, it's the Program Project Management Initiative. We got a new leader, says it's not an initiative anymore. We're doing it. What are you going to call it? And the notion, let's call it an Academy of Program Project Leadership. And because I always felt what project folks does, it's certainly management, but it's leadership. It's people, it's engagement, it's technology, it's strategy. And at NASA, they were totally into that. They totally bought into it. So the notion of mission-driven leader is that encompasses the controls, the management, the planning, the risk, the abilities, but it also controls the responsibility to be in the room with strategy. And I always tell the folks running projects, you better be in the strategy room. If they don't let you in the room, basically tell them you're not doing it. And that was the way it worked. But again, NASA was a completely projectized organization. So their lifeblood was on the success of that. So that's the background, and it worked, and it was called, we added engineering after a while. So it was the Academy of Program Project Engineering Leadership. And when I go to France, I get the fun question of appel, which means to help. And I get people saying, did you call it as that? And I said, well, no, I mean, most of the people in the States don't speak French, so probably wouldn't have, but it works in the European Space Agency, appel. So.
He's always got extra information that I'll
Too
never
much
have.
information.
Like it's always there.
Yeah.
And I think the other part of your question that really resonates with me is the part about project manager versus leader. And for me, anybody can be a leader. So it's not against your job title, it's against your character and how you want to show up to wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And the great project managers are leaders. But there's a lot of project managers out there that are not leaders, that kind of sit in their little boxes and tick away at them. And they're important too. They matter, and they contribute successfully on a regular basis to projects. But the really complicated projects, the ones where you're involving a multitude of interesting stakeholders, we'll put the description on it, is needed to have leadership there. And you are at the front of those conversations. You're the facilitator, you're the negotiator, you're the relationship rebuilder in many situations, and you might not even have broken that relationship. And so those project managers or program managers, they are leaders. So when you see those people say, oh yeah, I'm a program manager, chances are that they've been put in those really tricky situations and they showed up as a leader and brought everybody together the way it had to be brought together, versus a project manager that's really great at what they do that didn't have that same complexity. Yeah.
So I have a question from the table here, yeah?
You talked about the project manager being in the strategy room. What do you see as their role in that room, and how do you get the most out of it?
I think the person project management is to bring honesty and reality to what we're talking about. I think that there are two functions of any leader. One of them is to define reality, because in any kind of a place, you have people who are optimistic, you have people who feel they need to make a political decision. And so part of what the team in the room is to, here's reality, what we know. And the other action is to mobilize action. And basically it's the project folks who are gonna be doing things. And I was fortunate, again, growing up, NASA is a project organization. The power is at the project level. It is not at the top. And the reason for that is the expertise needed is going to be working at the project folks. So it's going to be, those are the people. If there's an argument typically between a project manager and the CEO or the head of NASA, the project manager will win. Because this is where your success, I mean, you're determining missions in terms of exploring Mars and going to different planets. Some of the missions are 5 years, some of them are 30 years. And if a failure comes because of a well-intentioned manager who doesn't have the expertise to make a decision, that's a game changer. So you want the project manager or the team. Sometimes it's not the manager, sometimes it's an expert who can talk to it. So if you're dealing with digitalization on a project, you'll have probably the project manager there, but you'll also have the digital lead to basically give you the reality as we know it best. And then the leadership can make a decision. So that's the way I saw it mostly working. And the times where things failed, usually decisions were being made by people who had titles, but they didn't have any of the background, and shame on us. So.
Now everybody's gonna become a project manager for NASA, because where have you ever been where it was like, no, I get the final say, like mic drop, and it's not gonna happen.
Okay.
So the other interesting part, and I know that you and I probably agree on this quite a bit, is that, you asked what the PM should be doing in those strategy conversations. Should they be in there? What should it look like? And again, I have kind of some degrees on that. If you're a contractor PM, you're in there to facilitate and provide observations and recommendations, and that's it. But if you are an employee of that organization, and the betterment of that organization is on you. It is on the project manager. We're there to deliver their capital spend. We're there to improve their customer relationships. We're there to increase efficiency. So it is on us. When we have the opportunity to share on strategy, we should be sharing. And if we're too afraid to bring our ideas forward, we're either not in the right organization, or you might need some business coaching to tell your story.
Yeah, I think it's important. And one of the things I see I'm excited about is that it's more of a project age. When I started in the 80s, it was construction, DoD, probably oil and gas, and aerospace. And project management was seen as a different, they do that. We're not really sure how they do it, they do that. And now it's really a core competency. Columbia University had a list of the 5 key competencies you need to be successful in the future. One of them was project management.
Yeah.
And
the other one was knowing Ed.
Huh?
I said, and the other one was knowing Ed.
No, definitely not. No, I mean, but that says something. And when I speak to every one of my students, even the ones who won't show up at a room like this, they say their key issue is project management or agile management and how to learn that. And many of them have that attitude of they're going to be called on to express what they need to express. I think that's a real important one. And also culturally, one of the things that I think in good organizations, I was encouraged to be bold at NASA because the models I saw were people who were bold. And they said things that sometimes ruffled feathers, but that was appreciated because it helped the organization. Example of that, years ago I was getting ready to, we were rolling out a new project management policy. My team had worked it and had been involved. The deputy chief engineer, who was a friend, basically says, I'm not sure you're going to be at that meeting to present it. I said, I'm going to be at that meeting, and I got members on my team at the meeting. We worked it. He says, I'm not sure it's going to work that way. You know what I mean? And I said, Keith, I will fight you to the gates of hell to be in there if I have to go to the administrator, and then we calmed down. But, and I thought when it came out of my mouth, it's kind of like how's it going. But I think it's important that if you're involved, you have expertise, you have the knowledge, and you've worked on things and reports, then you should at least be able to be heard. And in general, that was the culture that was there, again, because the respect of the influence and the expertise was at the middle of the organization, not perceived to be at the top. Different kinds of expertise at the top.
It was about 15 years ago, maybe not 15, but a couple of days ago. And I had put forward a question to the Executive Council saying, why are we not seeing more CPOs in leadership roles, like chief project officers? Because they're the ones that are actually delivering these things out, and they don't have a voice at that executive table. They've got the financial voice, which we always say is do it for less. We've got the operational table that says we don't need projects, we just need to do what we're doing. And we've got the CEO that says, hey, let's take a look around and see where we can go into different markets. But so where did the CPO go? And I asked that question of the Executive Council, and they said, oh, we're seeing it. And that was 15 years ago. We're not seeing it yet. I feel that Canada in particular is very traditional in nature, and we see a lot more of those kinds of trends in Europe. But I'm not noticing it in the US either. Yeah.
So one of the things, things can be called different things. For example, NASA has never formally used the word project management office or executive project management office. And yet, for easily 30, 40 years, there have always been project directorates within a field center that is responsible for overlooking the care, the capability, the development, the technology of a project. You have at the agency, at the headquarters level, a projects and engineering office that overlooks the thing. It really serves the function of a executive PMO.
Which is different because you guys are projectized, right? But
yeah,
there isn't that many
yeah.
NASAs out there, right?
But more and
I
more.
didn't say asses. I said NASA's.
I think more and more. If you look
I
at,
saw you.
if
I
you look
saw
at
you.
pharmaceutical, if you look at health industry, if you look at different, I think it's becoming more normalized. But I may be, I don't know. I mean, you'd know better than I would. But
I would? Oh, goodness.
well, I was talking to
Oh,
the
them.
community.
Okay, then that's better.
Not all about you.
Yeah,
It's about
thank
the,
you. No kidding.
about the community. Any other? Yeah.
I do have a question here. This way.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
Just
there's-
kind of a long and winding question. Let me frame it. So it kind of branches off from the discussion you were having, which is about project managers in an executive setup, like having a place in the strategy room, discussing strategies. And Laurel, you mentioned about leadership. That's one part of the question. The other part of the question, and I'm framing it still, I've read articles all the way up to HBR saying that project managers are considered to be more of operational people doing transactional tasks. They are not considered as candidate to move up to the executive role. I don't know if you have heard that, but my question is, and I don't believe in that, my question is, have you heard that? If you have heard that, how to break that myth? How can project managers establish themselves that they are eligible to be considered for executive roles? Thank you.
Yeah, so I'm very passionate in this area. It is a stigma for a project manager to feel like they're at their plateau, like the first time they become a project manager. And to me, and PMI has heard this from me a lot. PMI really loves me. That we haven't done a good job of creating clear roadmaps of your career for that of a project manager. So basically, you can be a project manager, and then you become a senior project manager, and then you can become a program manager or portfolio manager. But what then? What? And I actually think that we're getting asked to come into more strategy conversations if we insert ourselves into those conversations, because the career roadmap doesn't lend itself to what we can do and what we can accomplish for an organization. And in fact, if you asked your HR department, and I challenge you all to do it, except for you guys that work with me, don't do that. I challenge you to say, can you show me the career path for project managers here at Suncor? Sorry, Suncor. Or, and ask them and say, I really want to know it. I want to see what it looks like so that I can figure out my trajectory here at this organization. And with confidence, I'll tell you, they'll be like, project manager starts at project manager, and they have nothing. They have nothing. And so that's the challenge. So you have to insert yourself, take that opportunity. A lot of really brilliant program managers turn into great business architects. And business architects are the ones that see the vision for the organization and help create the roadmap of strategy. And so there, it does exist, but it's not intentional, right? Like we have to work and fight for it. Like fight for it, I fight for it. And I think that if you love strategy, step in.
So the couple of things I said, first of all, a lot of stuff that goes into the Harvard Business Review is generic, fluff. And probably years ago, I had spoken to folks at HBR about doing an article on NASA project leadership. And they came back saying, well, we'd like you to do an article, but on leadership. We don't want it to be project. And I said, well, then you got the wrong person. Because what we do here is projectized, and we need to look at the world really in different ways, which is why most of my articles, books are MIT Press. So one of the things I would basically say is, if you look at the sources, I think sometimes push back of what are you representing? It's a knowledge age, it's a project age, and projects is a part of leadership at all levels. The second thing, which really echoes to you, so I served under 5 administrators of NASA. 2 of them, background was project management, program management. One of them was a business leader. And let's see, the 2 others were, were leaders in different kinds of activities. So you get that, but they were all basically seen as strategically important to what was going on. So I would look in terms of the organization, what are the steps that get someone to an executive position? And, I'd basically approach it that way in terms of how to appear it and how to move in that direction. And, I think it's also a function of time. Like I said, appearances to the contrary, I'm not that old, but I was working 30 or 40 years ago. Stop laughing.
That's sorry.
And change doesn't happen that quickly. But, the world really wasn't focused on projects. There were very few places I could go. Went to PMI, but I couldn't go to too many places to hear about project management, project leadership. Again, it was NASA, it was military, which is a different kind of game. And nowadays it's much broader. And so I think it's partly as time goes by, I think things will probably change in that direction. But you get to an executive position based on the strategic importance that's placed in things. So, yeah.
Hi, thank you. So we are talking a lot about success and leadership, and I always get the sense that we learn more from mistakes and failure.
Yeah.
So I'm really intrigued about if you ever happen to be part of an unsuccessful project at NASA, and what did you learn from it? So
how much time do we have?
Well, I actually think I'll let you start. Not because I, don't love to talk, but just maybe 15 minutes before we started this session, we were talking about how NASA focuses on its failures versus its successes. He's also a success, and so I think you've got a really great story to share. I've got a boatload of failure. Like if you guys want to talk about like things other than this concussion, I got some stories.
Now I'm interested to hear about more of your country. No, I think so. One of the things I said, which I think was true, is NASA is a place where there's a mistake, a mishap, or a failure in a project. They're all over it. Because again, you have to understand that when you're at NASA, you just want to keep playing the game. You want to keep getting the funding. And the way to do that is to have the appearance and the reality of being successful at using the taxpayer dollars. So a mistake, a failure is a threat to the system. So the learning that goes into that is immense, to the point where I could strategize my budget increases when there was a significant failure that scared the larger leadership. I would have about 1.5 to 2 years to basically say, these are the things that we need to do, and we need budget for that. And basically it would appear, because that is the nature of the work. So we tended to be great at learning from mistakes and failures, but I said, wouldn't it be nice if we learned from successes? Because most of the time they do, but when you have a success at NASA, well, that's taken for granted. If you have a success for NASA, you have a kind of culture saying, well, you got successful because you got lucky. And it's a lot tougher to, it's that kind of a thing. So it's almost reversed in that kind of a standpoint. I tell you, one of the things that was a personal, it probably wasn't a failure because it turned out okay, but it was a real mistake and it was a potential failure. After the Columbia failure, we got a new administrator, huge failure. Really a brilliant guy, new project management, new systems engineering, teach schools in this, and but very, very intense. He basically said, it's not about improving project management at this point. We have to get the strategy and the governance correct. And he said, because I think what happens is we have too much power in Washington. The field centers are doing the projects and the engineering, they need to have it. We have an unbalanced kind of focus on how we're doing things. We need to create a new governance. We need to start with this is a project-based organization. And this is what that means with the values, with the approaches, with the strategies. And he said, I want you to lead this. And I have a career where I get asked to do things that I have no background for. And the two things that I went for in my career, I got turned down. So that's kind of, which I had a strong background in. But he said, I want you to lead this kind of initiative with writing it, and I want you to do it in 60 days. The background there is there had been no strategic governance document that NASA had ever worked on that took less than 1.5 years. So I said, I know this sounds kind of crazy. And I said, well, can we do it in 3 months? And he said, no, I want to show Congress that this is not your grandfather's NASA. We're going to do this fast. We're going to do it right. It's going to be 20 pages. It's going to be engaging. It's going to be all this kind of stuff. And the ego in me, and I learned from that, basically what came out is, yes, sir, I can do it. And I ended up spending 59 days away from my wife and family. We turned it in on the 59th day, which they were all happy about it, but they didn't ever use it for another 3 months because they had to get internal approval, then congressional approval. And in the meantime, I was involved in basically what's known at NASA as a fast-track project, which is known for significantly increasing the likelihood of divorce, mental illness, and all the other things. And the way things were, if you work in the US government, you have to be 60 miles or away to be able to stay in a hotel. They didn't want me working in Washington because they felt I would be contaminated by those folks around me, my friends and colleagues. So I had to be 60 miles away. There's another rule, you can't be in a hotel for more than a week. So every week I'm moving hotels, and I would get together with the small team writing this thing, starting at 7 o'clock in the morning and getting back to the hotel 10:30 at night. And I was emotionally burnt. I woke up certain times. I didn't know literally where I was. I was not home for basically 2 months. The one time I was going home, felt it was an act of God. I'm driving on the Washington Beltway, and my car engine just literally starts blowing up. Only time that ever happened. I get off the road, I get stopped, call home. This is what's going on. Well, we have your birthday stuff. And I said, okay, I can get home, but I'm going to have to turn around like in a few hours. And she said, no, just go back. It doesn't make sense. It was just the wrong decision. I always would have told project folks, you have to be reality-based. We didn't need to do it in 2 months. We could have done it in 6 months. We certainly could have done it in 3 months, and I would have had a normal life. The other members of the team could have had a normal life. And I really came close to, in my view, losing my marriage. By the time I got home, my kids were kind of aloof. The dogs are the most loving thing. The dog really stayed away from me for a period of time. And they took a picture where they gave me an award, a FAST award, and I looked like I was on drugs. And a key part of success is wellness. Key part of success is honesty. Key part of success is doing things that make sense. And that was an ego decision that we all got into. And it took me months to physically get back in shape. And I learned that it worked well in general, but it was a real bad time of my life. And it was physically difficult for probably about a year after that. So, yeah.
So
many failure stories, by the way,
Yes.
which are better over drinks.
I have a question here. How do you see the future of NASA with SpaceX?
It's beautiful. 90% of NASA's work is done by industry. NASA is always, one of the reasons why it's popular with politicians and citizens is that the money doesn't stay in the government, it goes to the industry organizations. If you look at where NASA is located in the United States, it's all around the country. Why? Because you have politicians all around the country, and you can always get a contractor who says, we need NASA. And that's what's going to go on right now. And SpaceX gets money from NASA. It's a contractor for NASA. And it's an interesting story because how does NASA's government, how does it innovate? It's hard to innovate in government, if you even can, because there's too many pressures. There's too many people who will beat you up before you can do anything. So 20 years ago, crazy, brilliant maniac, Elon Musk comes up with a proposal. He basically says, NASA, you're old, you're slow, you're dated, Boeing, you're the same thing. We're going to be able to dramatically, bring down launch costs. We're going to be innovative. We'll get it done. And they made a proposal. And NASA initially gave them, was a relatively small budget, but it was a proof of concept budget. And he was successful that first year. And then they got more money. And now they're the largest contractor because of their excellence and because of Boeing mistakes of losing sight of the importance of people. I won't go into that. But so the success of SpaceX, frankly, the success of Blue Origin, the success of Boeing, the success of Grumman basically is what gets the success of NASA. 90% of NASA's budget goes to industry, small and large. 90% of every NASA project is an international partner, including the Canadian Space Agency. So if you can't be successful, you're tapping into expertise all around the world. And we're not then working effectively. But SpaceX success was beautiful. It changed the paradigm. It made traditional organizations like NASA and others redefine how to work a project in that area. So it's a tremendous success story and an example of how innovation can get done by shifting the risk to industry. And then if you have success, you iteratively do more. And if it's a failure, Congress and media doesn't really care that much about a small industry entity that fails.
So I hope my question's not outside of scope, but I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on what I call what's called optimism bias. We seem to have anecdotally a lot of projects going over schedule, over cost, and it seems to be becoming a bit more common. Just if you have any thoughts on that.
Do you ever have optimism bias in Taleo?
Do I? I don't know. I don't know that I love the term that it's optimism bias, because I actually am a glass half full. So that's kind of how I operate. But I'm also a realist. And I'm finding that the reason we are doing such a poor job, we as a global, we not as you out there, in delivering projects, is because we don't have people making decisions anymore. We have a lot of consensus groups. We have a lot of people going, oh, well, I'll make the decision next week. And that next week goes on for 6 months. Well, guess what? You've screwed our budget. Sorry, I won't swear. So screw. You've screwed our budget.
Did.
No, it's like a screwdriver.
Oh.
You've screwed our budget. You've screwed our timeline and our schedule. And now I don't even know where my scope is at anymore, because you delayed everything else. So at what point is it on us versus on you to make that simple decision? And honestly, on average, if we're really great at our jobs, we're giving you your opportunities, we're giving you your risks, and we're making it as clear as possible on what you have to do in order to make a decision. So bloody well make the decision. Just do it, right? Like that to me is a real great frustration. And so that's why I believe it's far more real than it ever was before, that projects are not getting delivered to the desired expectation. But guess what? You're not giving me what I desire for an expectation, so blow it out your ear.
Wow. You're clearly customer service.
I'm all
at
service.
Taleo.
I'm all service for the customer.
I would, no, it's a real issue. Look, there's a thing at NASA called launch fever. Launch fever is, have you ever been at a launch, a shuttle launch? Okay. It is an amazing experience. It is one of the most amazing experiences in life. And you get there and you want this thing to launch. And if you have a family or a wife or a friend, you want this thing to launch. And so it shifts it becomes the drive to do. And then there are a lot of things, and there's a lot of people rightfully who are saying there are issues here. And the safest launch when you don't launch anything. And so there's a different kind of a thing. But I think I go back to the leadership thing. What makes project professionals, I think, so good is that they're brutally honest, to the point sometimes of being nauseating.
Like
because
I was.
It's really important. Like you're great at this.
I was just,
You got to basically be able to share what your perception of the truth is. One of the things that in a NASA project team I'll do is tell me, let's assume that this thing has failed. What has caused the failure? And so it's a different way of giving permission to talk about that. The other thing that, and I'm talking to the students, which is a great, I guess, elixir of thing. I said, you've got to know what you feel you're sure of. And you have to be in an environment where you're enough of a professional and ethical enough to speak the truth. So I was talking to someone who says, I got to present something to leadership, but they're not going to want to hear it. What should I do? I said, that's the purpose. You got to bring it up. What happens if they fire me? Well, then you're in a relationship you don't want to be in. But the hardness of project, the reason why project managers, I think, are great, or that's what I saw, is that they are bold, brutal, sometimes uncensored people. But if they're telling the truth, then we have to deal with it. And so it's a definite real thing. And sometimes it's the fever to do something, or the political pressure to tell someone what they want to hear as opposed to what they have to hear. And so I always expected at a certain point in time I'd get fired because
me too.
Because of my style.
I mean, for me.
For you.
Yeah, not for
You're going to fire me? Okay.
No.
But anyway, so it's a real issue, and it gets into the whole issue of cognitive bias and decision making. And it's about defining reality and mobilizing research. It's also easy not to do anything. I've seen some folks, if you get overly bureaucratized, nothing's happening, and then that's a whole different issue. But yeah, keeping we would call it healthy tension. You have engineering, you have science, you have technologists, you have business people, you got a lot of talent, you have partners. There should be a healthy tension of people saying, maybe we got to do things a different way. We got $1.5 million, right? Or no?
Well, we have to give the shirts away, though.
Oh, all righty.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that?
No
one asked you a tough question about.
I told my tough story. I completely was vulnerable to all of you.
Yeah, that's.
I even almost fell down in a dress.
That was potentially embarrassing.
Yeah. Potentially.
No, I mean,
okay.
Kidding. Good question.
Yeah.
How come you didn't?
Because they were trying to turn it on. And so trying to turn it on and having it unplugged, it was never going to turn on.
I don't know. Sounds like.
Hey, it's tough being on a farm. You know what I'm saying? Okay.
Yeah. I will stay away from meat.
Be my model. So we got shirt one that says, I need my space with NASA.
One of the best memes ever.
Yeah.
I went home to this the first time it came out. My wife says, what do you mean by that? What are you saying? I said, yeah, I know.
So that's tricky conversation.
Tricky.
That you probably
That's a beauty, though.
For that. And then the other one's the traditional NASA with the really cool guy that floats around and stuff. Yeah.
And that's in black.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
So how are you?
Well, have you guys ever been to a hockey game where you got to cheer? Is anybody at all interested in cheering for 10 seconds? And I will literally run. Okay, yes! Yes, 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 yes. Ooh! Ooh! Ah! Ooh! Okay, 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 okay. Yes, 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 yes. Woo! There we go.
Oh, man. Wow.
How did
you people will do anything for a $20 shirt. Right? It's like, it works.
Fantastic.
All righty.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. I have a question, since we've never met before. Were you this much of a plain-spoken, blunt, whirling dervish before you got brained by a pastrami, or only since then?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I'm really curious.
I've kind of been an asshole my whole career.
Love it. Who here wants to go work for Laurel?
Yeah.
And, right? Like,
come see us at Taleo's booth.
Who works currently for Laurel who wants to work for somebody else?
Yeah, I'd like to know those people.
Put your
please
hand
come see me.
Get those hands down.
Come see me. Thank you both. That was really enjoyable. Very, very informative
Absolutely.
as well. So let's hear it for Ed and Laurel.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Mission Driven Leader podcast presented by TaleoConnects.com. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review wherever you listen to the show.